Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Whitus, and it's super great to see all of these wonderful friends of ours, friends of T-Space, wonderful artists, and new visitors to T-Space as well. So thanks so much for joining us for this virtual tour of our, I just got a text from Enrique reminding people, excuse me, to mute your microphones for the time being during the conversation between Elena and Hiroyuki. And then afterwards, we'll have conversation, Q&A, so then you can unmute your mic when you speak. All right, so I'm just really happy that T-Space can foster this discussion between these two artists that we admire very much. As many of you know, both Hiroyuki and Elena are Guggenheim Fellows. They also happen to show at Laurie Bookstein, but most importantly, they're two artists of integrity and depth, and whose work explores core meanings of art that we really need right now. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Hiroyuki Hamada and Elena Sisto.
So we'll start with the video. So there's a short 2-minute video, 2 minutes, I think, that Laurie Bookstein did, and we're gonna start with that.
I just start from nothing. It's sort of like fishing. If there's no fish, no matter how hard you try, you can't catch them. The sense of time, the sense of space can be manipulated in interesting ways. Everything is part of the wholeness. It's good to have both perspectives. The eyes to see the three-dimensional thing and the eyes to see two-dimensional thing. I like material that allows me to be flexible, spontaneous. I feel that we have capacity to extract something as a form that can be communicated. The essence of the story is always I'll do my best to figure out who we are as a human being, but at the end, I don't think I would know what that means until I saw my work and my existence in its totality.
First, I want to thank Susan Whitus for inviting me to do this interview and congratulate T-Space for mounting such a stunning show of sculpture and painting, and Enrique Garcia for making this happen technically. Hiroyuki and I have both shown our work with Laurie Bookstein for many years, and I've very much enjoyed the process of getting to know his work better. It's extremely well realized and quite surprising in many cases, which is what we all want, I think, when we're looking. Okay, can we have slide 63? Or image 63. Hiroyuki has his own way of thinking, which I would say is both concrete and abstract. It's developed and compact. He goes his own way in his work. The sculptures and paintings have a lot of depth and the surfaces are quite significant. There's a great deal of tension between the surfaces and the interiors of his pieces. Some seem almost inflated, massive but simultaneously light as a feather. It gives them an animation and a character-like quality and a slightly funky appeal, but refined. And the work is very essentialized, which really invites projection by viewers onto the work. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do, give impressions and ask some questions. So this is, he doesn't title his work, but this is number 63, and it's from 2006 to 10. So this is one of my favorite of his pieces. It has amazing scale and makes me think of a giant futuristic apartment building with blacked out windows. Oddly, the fact that the windows are blacked out only adds to the buoyancy of the piece. The surface has a lot of figuring on it, like an engineer trying to work something out late at night. It indents at the bottom and lifts up on one side at the top, seeming like it's levitating. It's got a futuristic quality, a relic from the future where society might be living in such a structure. It also reminds me of a kitchen from the 1930s or 40s because of the white, boxy, rounded form, the indentation at the bottom, and the coffee-colored stains. How does a piece like this come about, Hiroyuki? Do you know exactly what you're going to make beforehand? Could you describe the physical process of making a piece like this?
Well, first of all, I really like hearing what you said. It's really an interesting description. I always enjoy how people perceive what I make. I think that's because in a way I don't allow myself to do that. I sort of empty myself, and I try to listen to what the elements are doing, and I let things do, and that's the major, the core process to me. And more specifically, I start with drawing. Usually I make marks, I make shapes, and certain things speak to me, and that leads to something else, and I make layers, and eventually it comes to some sort of conclusion. I regard that as some kind of seed for a sculpture. So I use that as a guide to let it grow. And and the process, I started out as a painter, so the structure making is pretty rudimentary. I use materials that are readily available, things I can get at a hardware store. When I was making this piece, I think I used uh, just wood, foam as a basic structure, and there's a shell of plaster on the surface, and I would paint on the surface. And like you were saying, there's a tension between the surface and the structure itself, because I think that because I'm basically a painter, uh, painting on the surface of sculpture. So I always utilize this angle of working with three-dimensional shape and um, um, just shaping the surface, shaping the shape with the surface building. So these things kind of go back and forth. They have an interaction between those, and um, um, that's one of my ways to um, make a presence in the space by walking on the surface and the uh, sculpture, the object.
So two things. So you would say that the structure of the piece is wood and then plaster, and then the way that you get those kind of rounded forms is by sanding or sanding the plaster down. But the outer
Right.
surface is plaster.
Right. I usually have a basic idea about profile or the top view, and so I cut the material in a way that's given. You know, I can still work on the shape as well as the surface. So it's really not specific. I kind of uh, uh, go as I uh, do those things. Decisions are made during the process. I would find ideas. I would discover ways to solve certain things. And sometimes I get ideas about other pieces by engaging in this making process.
So when you were talking before about associations, I mean, for the viewer, it's easy to make associations and not limiting to actually allow the associations to become complete images, like what I was saying before when I look at your work. But I gather for you, it's more a matter of if you get an association, you work with it, but you never get it, allow it to completely come to fruition. In other words, you keep it all as potential. Is that true?
Well, I don't even uh, make association when I'm making things. Like, you know, when I come up with a shape, I don't actively think that, oh, that looks like something. Um,
How do you
although
keep
people say
yourself from
things.
doing that?
What's that?
How do you keep yourself from doing that? Is it just you naturally don't do?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes people come to my studio and, you know, they will say that looks like this or that. One time, my wife said, your pieces look like shoes," um, and um, you know, but I guess I've done this years and years. You know, when I'm in the studio, when I look at things and let things sort of interact in the way they do in my mind, that's a rewarding process, and I appreciate that. So it's really not that. It's I guess it's. Um, uh, um, I, I mean, you know, if I have firm stance about limiting this or that, I think that's going to affect my attitude as well.
Yeah.
So it's just a little more fluid.
Mhm.
It's a little more relaxed. You know, I'm receptive to everything,
Mhm.
which means I'm not really particularly um, tuned to certain things. I think that's more of how it is.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's move on to the next question, which is for slides 52 and 54 side by side. Um, and these are two pieces. The one on the left, number 52, is from 2002 to 2008, and the one on the right is from 2003 to 2008. The thing one notices first about both of these pieces is their symmetry, the honed bullet or helmet-like form, and the singularity of the forms. They are subdivided, but the overall shape prevails. They seem to be small beings presenting themselves publicly for view. 54, let's look at the detail of 54, has circular perforations at the top and diagonal seams and scoring on the lower half. It seems to be spinning. It could lift up or burn to something or be as kind as the Hershey's kiss. And then let's look at the next slide. They're not small. These pieces aren't small. The bottom half has an ever so slight sag to it, which makes it more organic, like a breast. What were you thinking about in these pieces? What emotions do you associate with them? Ah. You don't have to define them all completely, but.
Right. I mean, I definitely try to feel them.
Yeah.
But I can't really pinpoint, you know, the feeling. But I do try to grasp it in a way that's concrete in myself. But I don't really define it. You know, I mean, you know, it's really hard. I can't describe it. And this is the thing about, you know, describing art. It's, no, it's
Well,
really.
would you say that they have emotionality without? They have a lot of. To me, they seem to have a lot of emotionality without, you know. Being one specific emotion. You know, they seem to have a lot of feeling in them though. I mean, they're not like just geometric, you know.
Right. I mean, they are really not, I mean, they're symmetrical. They do look balanced and all that. But if you look at it carefully, it's really, it's rather irregular. There are things that are not the same from one side to another, and there's always a little bit of gestural quality that's defining the shape to be somewhat organic, somewhat encompassing complex structures surrounding the whole thing. Especially the other one.
Let's go to the other one. Yeah.
There's a slight tilt.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Right. There's a slight directionality when it sits on the pedestal, and that's also emphasized by the patterns on the surface. And these are all intuitive process. I would just try to harmonize. I would try to make the rhythm that's going with the wholeness of the sculpture. So it's a lot about feeling it. I'm sure that there are emotions involved in it, but it's really hard to describe.
So maybe feeling is a better word than emotion.
Well, maybe, but those things really, it's sometimes interchangeable, you know.
Yeah, but maybe also sometimes they're not. I mean, maybe emotion takes it too far, makes it too defined or something. But I just wanted to say this one sort of is sort of like a funky igloo or something. And it looks like it's levitating because you can't see how it contacts the floor or the base. And I wanted to know, that adds a sort of sense of humor to the piece. And I was wondering, in general, if humor is something that you look for in your work and in your life, if that's part of your interest in the work.
Right. I mean, or more of a sense of, right. I mean, sense of humor. I think so. Or, and that probably borders with playfulness or sense of absurdity, something like that. Because it's definitely not like it's not funny. It's well, actually, sometimes I do look at something in my studio and laugh, and I don't know why I would laugh.
Yeah.
It's very strange. The making process is there are elements of surprise, and there are elements of course, accomplishment. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But sense of humor, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Especially in paintings, I think I get that more maybe because I get to be more spontaneous. I get to be a little more free about how I express
Uh-huh.
the visual narrative. Um,
Who's moving the cursor there? You see there's a little cursor moving around.
Sorry, I was letting somebody into the meeting.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a fly on my screen for a while. Okay, great. Let's go to number 73. Okay, this is one of my favorites. From the front, it looks like thought bubbles piling up, but then maybe it's another futuristic home for a community that floats in space. It's funky and refined, something hard to get. How did this piece evolve? You seem to guide your work rather than state it or attack it head on. And achieving harmony seems to be very important to you. Could you describe how you keep your process improvisational? Do you ever have to rip pieces apart and recombine them, etc.? I know you already answered this question somewhat, but maybe you could just elaborate a little bit more.
That's actually a very, very good question, and I kind of wonder about it because the process of making sculpture does involve moving toward this direction that's stipulated with the initial idea, the drawing I have. I probably should have sent you
A drawing?
Drawing. There's a drawing that's drawings are usually just a line defining the shape, and they're usually frontal. So, well, not necessarily, but so with this one, there's a process of figuring out the side views, how the shape actually manifests itself in the space, and so that's place where I work with the actual piece, and things could change. And of course, the building the surface, painting on it, is always a spontaneous process that could enhance certain aspect of the shape or de-emphasize certain aspect, and renewing the dynamics of the initial idea. But I'm very careful about keeping the sense of spontaneity, and I think that comes from, I think that ultimately, I think that comes from my honest interaction with the elements, and this authentic interaction makes it somehow spontaneous at the end, something that's not completely planned. There's something real about materials or the form elements in different ways.
So in this piece, there's a lot of horizontal and vertical divisions of the larger forms. And are those actually all for all different reasons? Like, are some of them scored, some of them are actually where pieces were put together, and some of them are printed or painted on? Is that true?
So some of the places are actual material doing
Joining.
There are two different chunk put together, and you see the thing. But a lot of the lines in this are just painted. So it is really a three-dimensional painting in a way, and I try to make sure that it's making sense from one direction to another. I would walk around, and it is an exciting process, and it does involve a lot of spontaneous decision making.
There are a lot of places where the little squares are very faint. Is that because you had something there and then you covered it over? Or, you know, like at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a square that's very faint.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, initially, I think I got the idea from that, but by the time I was making a piece like this, I came up with a way to do that. I would, you know, these are oil paint on the surface, so you can put really dark black paint, and then you can go back in with tape, and you can lift some paint off. And if you do it a few times, it changes. You know, it gets thinner and thinner. And if you do it like 5 times, and if you scrape it really well, you get really, really faint mark.
That's funny, because I was going to say before that some of those lighter marks on the top, those 3 horizontal marks, almost remind me of the stain Scotch tape leaves when it gets old. No? Which is a funny coincidence. Okay, let's go to the next one, number 59. Okay, so this piece makes me think of Scrimshaw because of the scoring of the surface, which is kind of like ivory. The form is tusk-like, although it has a much straighter trajectory. The seams are rough between the 4 sections of this piece, but the overall form is quite refined, which gives it an ancient/futuristic quality. It's like a relic of the past passing through our time into the future, especially the way that it's mounted on the wall. The scarring on the 4 sections doesn't line up, which makes each section seem to be revolving in a different direction, like the tumblers of a lock. And you have those black windows there again, which I now understand are tinted glass to protect the navigator from the light of passing stars. The engineer is back, figuring and erasing circles and rivets and tattoos. I think scale has a really important metaphorical value. Your pieces seem to be much bigger than they are physically. How were you thinking about scale when you were working on this piece, or do you think about scale at all?
That's interesting, because when I made this piece, I was planning to make it a little bigger, and and I actually had pieces cut out to do that, and I didn't do it at the end because I was so happy with how this thing turned out. But to answer your question, I think I'm always playing with the sense of scale. I like, I do take the feeling of when you actually stand in front of these things, you know, how you relate to them. And that makes a big difference in terms of what it means. Even though I'm not really quite sure what that means, but you're right about sense of time. Like there's a quality of some sort of ancient relic or something from the future. There is element that defies the sense of time, and I somehow I think I like to play with that, and the surface that's kind of worn, old, beaten up. Those things imply bring in the sense of time somehow, and yeah, there is something to how we perceive ourselves. If we put ourselves in the framework of geological time scale, that makes us smaller than how we usually perceive. And also the sense of scale, you know, if you have some object that seems bigger, you feel like your presence is smaller. So there is some sort of effect from these manipulations, but you know, I don't really I'm not conscious about these things, so I'm just thinking out loud with you. Trying to
I think it's
understand.
interesting that you said that you think of it in terms of geological time. That's really interesting. Okay, let's go to the next, which is number 81. The two, yes, okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you didn't know?
Yeah, well, I kind of knew that they're similar, but I haven't seen them
Together.
side by side. Oh my God.
So these two pieces are obviously related, although one seems softer and more intimate than the other.
Right.
The one, you know, the one on the right looks like a boxing glove with something being rammed into it. Do you often work this way in versions, or it sounds like you don't even actually think about it?
No,
So you wouldn't consider these versions, one a version of the other one?
Well, I have noticed, and there are a couple more pieces that are looking sort of like these, and it is interesting, and yeah, I wonder what it is. Yeah, I don't think the answer is that simple. It's a complex. There's a complex dynamics to arrive at these shapes.
Yeah, but I think that there's something elliptical about your process that kind of brings you back to the same place, but maybe on another level or whatever. You know, I think we all do that as artists, kind of
Right.
circle
Right.
around a certain number of ideas.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, and they're quite, you know, they're pretty far apart in time, right? Because one is from 2011, 13, and the other's from 2020. I guess that's
Right.
not so long, but yeah. So these, in the one on the left, the one that looks like a sort of a black igloo, so those markings that would seem like the horizontal and vertical markings, those are printed, or
No, these are actual segments. Um, um, they are the shape is made with the segments of the resin sheets that I make. I would take a template from the surface and I make a specific shape, and I will put it on the surface. And the other side, the other one is done in a very, I mean, it's the same way, but the surface is treated differently. The one on the left is sanded to smooth, and the one on the right is pretty much as it is. It's a pigmented resin without any surface treatment. So it has sort of like a rubberish feel, as opposed to the one on the left, which is more like a stone or something.
Yeah, a lot like stone. Yeah.
Right.
So what is the black on the one on the right? Is that paint? or what is the black pigment? Is it in
Oh,
the material or on the surface, or?
it's a pigmented resin. So it's the black is mixed in. You have two uh, um, hardener and the resin, and you mix those two, and it comes in different colors.
I see.
So
It's interesting how much warmer the black on the right is than the black on the left.
right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit of with the picture maybe because the background is a little colder, but
Uh-huh.
but they are different. They do the one on the right does have warmer feel. It looks softer somehow.
It does, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next, which would be number 81. No, number 90. Okay, so this piece is another one of my favorites. It reminds me of a speech bubble with a Nike swoosh burrowing into it. The surface tension is still there, but it's markedly less. The forms fold in, and the forms fold inward gently. There's a relational quality to this piece and the last two. There are parts interacting, and it feels more on an intimate side of the spectrum of your work.
Mm.
Would you agree with that? You know, that the feeling of these pieces is, say, for instance, compared to the first two that we started with that were like, you know, very symmetrical. I had the feeling when I was looking at them that they were little characters presenting themselves in public.
Mm.
Where I feel like this one is more sort of softer and more introspective and more intimate and more about not just one being, but maybe two beings, or maybe two parts of a being, but, you know, not just that kind of very synthesized, simple.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have another picture of this, by the way, do we? A larger picture, or Enrique? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think you know, I'm getting older. You know, I understand that things are not that straightforward. We live in a dynamics that's consist of so many different forces, and there are things you can reconcile. There are things you can't, and but they are all playing roles in our lives, and so so I wouldn't really. I don't feel right about things I made when I was younger. You know, I recognize them as nice, you know, but I don't really feel um, comfortable. I mean, not comfortable is not the word, I guess. Um,
You don't relate to them as much?
I guess that's how I. So and also this one. Is also more of sculpture, I guess. There are more elements of three-dimensional shape doing things instead of um, uh, my manipulation of the surface. I think the shapes are speaking more in the space, and so. Um, I think that's something
I
else.
particularly like the part of the piece where this, on the right-hand side, where the white form comes up and the black form rests on it and sort of indents where the white form is pushing into it. You know, it's that, I mean, I like the, you know, the negative positive relationships in this piece a lot, you know, the way the black is sort of negative on the left and then becomes really positive on the right, but then it becomes negative to the white.
Mm.
The white is pushing up on it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's like a kind of circulation of the form and
Mm.
compression and expansion that is very subtle, but very satisfying to look at.
Right, right. Oh, that's interesting because I do recognize that I often do that with paintings, and I don't consciously do it, but it happens to be that way. And I guess something like this is happening with sculptural form is interesting. I guess I'm learning to appreciate things about sculptures, I guess, finally, after 20 years.
Well, it's true for all of us, I'm sure. I love the way that little black form seems like it's really trying to get in there,
Mm.
get
Mm-hmm.
into that white space.
Mm.
Okay, let's go to the next, which you have introduced yourself, which is two paintings from the show at T-Space. Again, these seem more intimate. The elements feel like they're being slowly extruded or piling up on themselves. There's an affinity with the New York School painters, partly just because of your use of black and white, but also with your use of negative and positive. You're moving across a surface to create the illusion of depth, but there's really only up, down, left, or right on the surface in order to do that. And then there's concave and convex. So concave and convex automatically conjures up sexuality. And I see that in the sculpture too, as it goes on. So am I projecting wildly here, or do you agree with that kind of reading of the work?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Well, the one on the right especially, it keeps making me think of Gorky along the bottom there, the way that bottom form goes up into the form on the right. It splits it apart. So there's or on the one on the left, there's there's that negative and positive, for lack of a better word, thrust between the black negative space coming down into the white.
Right.
So I mean, I'm not saying that these are about sex, but I would say that about sexuality, but I would say that they have some kind of that quality of that kind of interaction between, I guess, the forms, or the black and the white,
Right.
which is very related to someone like Gorky or de Kooning or any number of the New York School painters.
Right. I mean, like I said, it's really hard for me to, because I don't really actually know. But I'm sure, sex would involve emotion, physicality, pleasure, pain. It's part of human condition we deal with, and so it could be a good way to tell narrative in some ways. Yeah.
I mean,
but this is not the first time people said about it, and so I guess there's something to it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I
think it's sort of unavoidable when you reduce your elements down to black and white, concave and convex,
right?
Which is really what you're doing here, for the most part. Okay, let's go to the last image. This is you in your greenhouse in East Hampton. Why did you decide to live out in East Hampton? Were you trying to get away from the art world in New York City, or how does that relate to you?
No,
relate to that?
Well, I was just going out with somebody, and she lived in East Hampton, and initially I was commuting, and at some point she just said, "Why don't you, be here?" So that's what I did, and that was 20 years ago, and so it was pretty much accidental, but. But my house is 7 minutes away from where Jackson Pollock was, and we hear about the stories about those people, and there is definitely historical significance, and local galleries would show. Um, Things from the time from 50s, 60s sometimes, and I get to enjoy those. Yeah, it's really interesting. It was totally accidental, but I do appreciate how things uh, connect, and yeah.
And what are you growing in this picture?
Well, that looks like tomatoes, maybe. Uh, um, and the behind that there's zucchini, maybe, and yeah. But this is from a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
and yeah. Um, yeah, I do gardening a little bit. I think it's healthy to touch soil and sort of be uh, part of the rhythm of how things grow, and that's something I appreciate. When I was close to the city, I had no idea about how to grow things, and or even what the seasons do to you. The
Uh-huh.
rhythm of how plants grow, and how we adjust to certain crops at certain times, and it's an interesting way to um, I think it's a part of being a human, to be connected to uh, nature, food, plants, and I think making art to me is sort of like that too. I think it's essential. There's something essential about being human, making things, making sense out of form elements, and sharing with others. And you can do that with people in the past, and it's interesting that way, I think.
Yeah. Well, speaking of humans, does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask of Hiroyuki?
Um, I sent you, we had a little email chat one time about authenticity, and you said it's tricky and didn't go beyond that. And so I just want to thank you for saying that, because now as I scroll through Instagram looking at people's work, I think about authenticity and what seems authentic and what doesn't. And it's also a kind of a test for the studio. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for checking in. I'm really happy that you're here, and yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Gina? We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
I was curious if you could talk about your choice to not use color and how you think of white perhaps as a kind of color.
Um, well, um, it's not like I don't like colors. Um, um, I like paintings quite a bit. I actually had I organized a show over the summer, and I picked 3 painters, and they all you use colors. And in my studio, I do have a lot of paint, different colors, and quite often I start painting with colors, and but toward the end they tend to get covered up, and yeah, so I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm more interested in shapes, texture, um, um, but I'm really fond of looking at paintings with colors, and so maybe that's going to change. I don't know. And pieces with white. I think. I mean, black and white both have really great varieties. Warmer black, colder black, different shades, and if you look at my sculptures, the surface, the white part in particular, I like to do things on the surface. And there's a lot of varieties in terms of shades. Um, 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 so yeah, but that's something I've known about my work, and what people talk to me about, and but it's not like I don't like colors or anything like that.
No, I was just interested in how you made the choices you made. So, your white pieces seem to evoke a lot of color, and
Oh.
the black is more subdued in a way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Gina and Hearn, do you agree with what I said about the New York school?
Yeah.
Yeah. More or less. Any other questions?
Actually, Elena, I saw a really nice connection in the paintings to Guston's last work.
Yes.
The
I
crown.
saw it in the sculpture more, like
Yeah.
that one, like the boxing glove one.
Yeah.
Lisa Hoke has a question. You have to unmute yourself. You're still, we can't hear you. Here, I'll unmute you, I think. Oh, can I? Maybe Susan, you have to unmute her.
Lisa's unmuted. We should be able to hear you now.
Maybe she just really doesn't have a voice. We can't hear you. Can you type it? Do you know how to do that? Why can't we hear her? Can you hear her?
Lisa, can you type it in the chat, or turn your raise the volume on your sound, maybe on your computer?
This is what happens when you don't teach.
Sometimes it works to sign out and sign back in.
Oh, that's
That may, well, why don't we go to another question while she tries to resolve her sound issue?
But Lisa, before we do that, Lisa, it might be easier, just go down to the bottom and click on the chat thingy, and then you can write your question. Okay, go ahead.
Any other questions?
Can I just say?
Yes, Lizzie.
It's a comment, not a question.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Hiroyuki will want to say something. I know. Sorry, my computer says Lizzie because. Anyway, when Gina was asking that question about color, I just was wondering if there's such a strong graphic connection to the sculpture and in the paintings too, that if using black and white keeps that alive. I mean, there's such a delicate line making in the sculpture. And I guess I've seen Hiroyuki, I've seen you drawing a lot. And I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that, about maybe black and white and the primacy of drawing in your work.
Right. Well, I mean, the fact that I start with drawing and that turns into sculpture is probably an indication that I'm probably interested in the elements that are not really related to colors, and the black and white would be sufficient in manifesting in whatever I'm trying to do. But that doesn't explain about the paintings. I do start with paintings, and I do enjoy the colors doing whatever they do. Yeah, but I don't know. It's yeah. What can I say? Yeah.
Well, I think that the answer is sort of in the question. I mean, you are really very interested in the graphic nature, the graphic aspect of form, right? The edges. I mean, there are, you know, your paintings don't have blurred edges, and your sculptures aren't just about mass. You're very interested in the, you know, the outline of the form. Right?
Right. Yeah. But I mean, yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so Lisa, who is still silent, but she has her question is this. T-Space is unusually sculptural. How did that impact your choice of work and installation?
Well, the choices were made by Lori and Joseph and myself, three of us getting together, looking at the space pictures and the floor plan, and Lori and Joseph, they are from Bookstein projects, and Lori had been to the space, so she knew a little bit about how the space was. So we tried to come up with cohesive presentation, and I was leaning toward just doing sculptures, and but they wanted to have paintings, and which also they did with the gallery show they had beginning of this year, and they did such a great job. So I had no objection to that, and so when we arrived at the space with those pieces that we picked, we tried to harmonize the pieces with the space, and so it was a collaborative process with the space and the pieces, actually working with those things in the space, placing them in certain spot, removing and trying different spots, and but the process was really it really forced us to be conscious about the space, which is it's a very, very interesting space with skylights kind of defining these cave-like spaces, and it's really made to create interesting spots for different presentations. So it was really one of the very interesting venues to make it work. And I think we did a great job hanging the show.
It's
I
a
think
shame
so
that-
too.
Can people make appointments to come see it?
We can do
It's-
that.
It's very difficult. It's very painful. The whole, you know, from everything that's been going on, obviously with quarantining. I was very sad that I wasn't able to. This is the first exhibition that I wasn't able to be involved in the installation for, because I was quarantining very strictly. But I thought you guys did an amazing job. The one thing I will also want to mention is that we created a very robust virtual exhibition on the website. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, we commissioned this beautiful video with images of the images in the space, and a conversation with Hiroyuki and Robert Morgan, and still photographs and historical process pictures and stuff like that. But because of COVID this year, T-Space just was not really able to be able to offer in-person viewings, sadly. But you know, and as we have more time to kind of plan that, you know, we're planning for next year so that we will be able to offer in-person, you know, viewings through appointments, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Elena and you and I were there, you know, last week, and it's very heartbreaking that we're not able to have people there right now, because it is beautiful. Hiroyuki, you mentioned the shrine-like quality of it. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit more. Just, you know, I feel that as well, but just as, you know, as you've talked about shrines and your heritage, I just thought that would be interesting to hear from you on that.
Well, I just used the expression, the word, because it feels like the space is meant to appreciate the interaction between the nature and us, the humans, how we relate to what's out there and contemplate and come to terms with. So so that way, it's a very successful structure that allows something like that to happen.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing how the relationship between the inside and the outside in that space.
Yeah, and the light and the way that the light moving through the space activates the work in such a special way.
Wasn't it designed originally as a studio? Or was it designed as an exhibit?
Really? No, it was really designed as a gallery.
Uh-huh. So does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Kylie, you got to unmute yourself. Hi.
Right. Beautiful work, just wanted to say. And I was wondering the role of drawing. I could see it like two ways, like if it's kind of resting or tightening the form further in the sculptures, or if it's kind of a dialogue between illusion and form. Do either of those ring true, or neither, or?
You mean the drawings? You mean the paintings?
The drawing on the sculpture.
Right. That's interesting. That's. I mean, I always like I make prints, and I also make paintings, and when I do, I recognize the fact that I can utilize objects and also the surrounding, the environment, how things can relate and how things can present themselves in certain environment. And that's interesting that you mentioned that you see that on the surface, and but I mean that's probably true, that that could happen too. That's inside can be outside and outside can be inside, and yeah, it's that's an interesting observation. I again, I'm not conscious about it, but
Yeah, it looks like it just could further tighten the form or be the the final firming up or something. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Susan, you want to take it away?
I sure will. Thank you all for joining us. It's just really been lovely to see your shining faces, and friends and new friends, and Hiroyuki, thank you so much for such an amazing show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very honored to have it, and hope everyone will go on the website and look further. And Elena, thank you so much for
You're welcome.
conversation.
You're very
an
interesting.
interviewer, and I love the interaction between you guys and everyone. So
Thanks.
thanks for joining us. Enjoy.
Thank you.
I hope to see you.
Bye.
Thank you.
in the future.
Great questions too.
I feel like I'm
Thank you.
teaching now.
Thank you.
Bye.